Good evening, afternoon, morning, night, whenever you find a way to watch or listen to this podcast. It is me, Omar from Hardware, and I am back with a longtime friend of this podcast, Duane from the Yard-HBCU Sports, and also too happy Memorial Day for everyone out there. Hope everyone got rest that was off, and we just want to remember the reason for this day and everything. So just happy to be to have time as well, just to record and just do something I love and discuss HBCU football, man, I greatly admire. So, Duane, thanks for coming on again. It's been a while, but I'm just glad, to have you on again.
Well, I would love to say it most definitely is an honor to be on this show with you this Memorial Day. Happy Memorial. Well, I mean, you're not gone. You're here with us right now. But as an active member of the military, I'd like to say Happy Memorial Day to you.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, there have been a couple people like not lost to war, but still lost. I mean, training accidents and whatnot. A couple people. So, it's just interesting, Just I mean, we think about war when we default to Memorial Day, but I've seen people honored on Twitter just for being lost in training accidents, or also too just like due to suicide, sadly, as that's a prevalent issue among
Mm-hmm.
active duty and veterans. So, but I'd hate to start with a somber mood on this day. I'm just glad to just talk HBCU football. As I mean, as we were talking beforehand, in 2 days we'll know. I mean, we already know when the Celebration Bowl is going to be, but I mean, we will know officially when it gets released with the whole bowl season schedule, and then we'll have the TV selections for the first 3 weeks. And interestingly enough, for like the TV selections, I thought I saw, I don't know if it was a fake story or from a blue check on Twitter, blue check mark on Twitter, but I saw something about like the MEAC SWAC challenge being on ABC at 7:30. I don't know if that was just a hoax or whatnot, but I mean, long story short, we're close. We're closer than you think to the college football season.
Yes, that seems to be the thing. There's been a lot of buzz around that game actually moving over to ABC. A lot of people are excited. Um, but you're right. Um, we won't know until it's official, but it's starting to sound as if that is the case because of the amount of buzz that's been surrounding that announcement. I've heard the exact same thing just a few weeks ago myself. If that's going to be the case, I mean, of course, football rules. It's week zero. People are anticipating, a viewership coming to that game, and with nothing else potentially being played on that weekend, well, no, they're going to be a few other games, a few other week zero games. But it's interesting that they have decided to move the MEAC SWAC challenge over to ABC.
Yeah, and I mean, I do agree. Just looking at the slate of games, I mean, I think the biggest game of the weekend obviously is Notre Dame Navy out
Mm-hmm.
there in Ireland. Then you also have USC, San Jose State, which also will probably get a primetime slot, whether it gets a network TV slot or whether that game gets designated by the Pac-12 network as, I guess, like USC's one non-conference game. We'll find that out of course, on Wednesday. But yeah, I do think it's interesting too because there just looks to be a lot of competition. I mean, not a lot, but it seems to be that there will be competition with that game. So we will see for sure. But I guess that's a can rearrange the outline that we talked about before this podcast, and just since we're on the week zero topic, a couple weeks ago, HBCU Game Day talked about the week zero plan for the SEAC and the CIAA to have a week zero game backed by HBCU Go. It was the brainchild of Charlie Neal, which I'm surprised with how much he's meant to HBCU football in the past or and even today that he didn't come up with this idea sooner. But Fayetteville State was going to play Benedict. It got shot down by the NCAA, and I'm a little bit confused about the reasoning. But I guess what are your thoughts on the whole situation? Do you think that both conferences can sort of figure this out and like find a way around to make this game happen? Because it would be great for college football. Or do you think it's just kind of something that's just gonna die very quietly and just like not be brought up again?
Wow, Omar, that oddly enough, this thing could go one of two ways. I don't know whether or not the SEAC and the CIAA are going to be capable of finding a way around the NCAA. Um, but hopefully they can work something out with the NCAA to make this game happen because you're right. This is a game that I believe, um, even if it's not the two conference champions, I believe this is a game that the fans of HBCU football especially of Division II football, would love to see. Um, but yeah, like I said, this could go either way. Hopefully, this will get worked out, and if not, then maybe this is something that just fades off and just becomes fodder for the two fan bases to discuss on what could have been and hope well, would have been potentially the regular season version of the Pioneer game or the Pioneer Bowl. I'm sorry.
I mean, I agree, and it's interesting that like we talk about the NCAA. Like just looking at the article now, it says that there hasn't really been precedent for Division II conferences playing in Week Zero games, but it's like the NCAA seems to just make up the rules as they go on. Because the first thing that comes to mind is Florida, Miami for the 150th anniversary. I mean, those two schools have no relation to the first college football game, but yet they were the first kind of big game in Week Zero of 2019. So. I mean, well, with everything, I take everything the NCAA says with a grain of salt, honestly. I mean, with whatever rules they have. So hopefully they figure something out, whether it be a waiver for, I mean, I guess a rule that's been wavered many times before or not. So I just hope it happens. Like, because, yeah, like, I mean, before I get too salty at the NCAA, like, before I go Charles Barkley on the NCAA and that viral clip, I'm just gonna leave it there.
Well, I might go a little bit salty on it because as to your point, it's rather interesting that for whatever reason, this waiver has been given to FBS and FCS, but not Division II. Um, God, and I don't want to say that it's because it's two HBCU conferences that are looking to do this um on week zero. They already have a network that's ready to broadcast this game. Everything is already set for this game, but the only thing that's standing in the way is the NCAA. It boggles my mind that that's the case, and why that's the case intrigues me. What I don't want to see is that two other conferences outside of the CIAA and the SEAC end up doing a week zero game, and then the CIAA and the SEAC have to follow in their footsteps when this is something that could have happened this particular season. They could have taken advantage of the fact that they actually had the two conference champions playing in a week zero matchup. Something that since we don't have a Division II Celebration Bowl, that would have been the closest thing to that.
I agree. And I mean, there's plenty of real estate, not just on Saturday for week zero, but also on Sunday. I mean, because they're
Mm-hmm.
competing with NFL preseason. And if I'm not mistaken, like back in the I guess the old era of kickoff games of week zero games before it was even called week zero, I think like the kickoff classic, I think it was either the kickoff classic or ABC had two games that were on that Sunday because there was no NFL regular season football. So I think I know NFL is king here in America, but I'd like to think that football fans would take games that actually count over NFL preseason games. Like, no offense to the guys fighting for roster spots, but I mean, I tend to think that's more important, than a preseason game.
No, I completely agree with you. And this can't be a situation where the NCAA is concerned about viewership. Um, it's Division II football. I'm not sitting here downing Division II football when I say that. Um, I'll make sure I structure this in a way doesn't where it doesn't sound like crapping on Division II football, because I thoroughly enjoy it. I thoroughly enjoy the job that HBCU Go has been doing with their broadcast. And again, this is that's why I'm wondering, why would the NCAA even care on what a Division II football game broadcast numbers? I doubt that that's the case. And I haven't heard another viable reason on why they decided not to do the game. So until I do, all I can do is speculate that it's not positive in terms of the NCAA's outlook on both conferences.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I have to think it's like, very, very bureaucratic and political in the background. So I guess we can just hope for 2024 for this game to get off the ground. I mean, and even then, like I know you mentioned I don't think viewership is the issue. I think there's football and there's like there is good, I guess, promotion and hype behind football behind a game. people are gonna watch it. Like the 2021 MEAC SWAC challenge. Like it was like I think the highest viewed game of the day or the second highest, but it got very good ratings once it was in prime time, once College Game Day was there, which it's a wonder why College Game Day didn't go back this past year. And I'm sure there will be promotional backing behind this game wherever it might be, and there will be good viewership as well because HBCU Go, who had the rights, is very accessible and whatnot. So I mean, I guess all we can say is just a missed opportunity in general. So hopefully next year it works out, and you know, yeah, I mean that's really all there is I have to say about that.
Just another quick tangent in terms of the NCAA. I mean, they won't find me. They won't sanction me. They don't care about me. They most definitely have been known to shoot themselves in the foot in terms of ways to and they've been known to shoot themselves in the foot when it comes to generating revenue. If you just take a look at the way that they handle women's athletics and the way that they tend to pigeonhole them and what they do, even though in their situation it seems to be them cutting off their own nose to spite their face, just doesn't make any sense. And then it's not as if the NCAA is gaining any revenue. It's what they're it just seems to be a way to just hold those two conferences back from generating revenue. It just does, and it just boggles my mind why they want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, on that note too, in terms of shooting themselves in the foot, I think if both conferences can come up with a valuation in terms of lost ad revenue, lost
Mm-hmm.
viewership revenue from the game, they could definitely bring a court case to the NCAA and just bring up examples like the 2019 Florida Miami for why they couldn't get this game going. So just and also the FCS exemption, which exists for like no other reason, but I mean, to give them a spotlight game. So why couldn't that exist for the Division Two? So,
Exactly.
yeah. So I mean, really, I mean, I think we both beat the horse dead on that one. So I guess moving on to other.
I mean, they say not to
Yeah.
kick a dead horse while it's down, but I mean that's the easiest way to kick it, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, we're both emotionally charged about this, for
Yeah.
sure. I guess moving on to our agenda, something that was, I guess, more quiet in the off season. I know Mo Carter, the great reporter, for I think it's like Fox 54, but the
Yeah,
great like.
Fox 54 down in Huntsville. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't want to say the wrong town. I just remember the number and the network. So Mo Carter reported that the SWAC Classic once again fell through, which I think after last year's fiasco, I think a lot of people weren't really focused on the SWAC Classic out there at Legion Field. Next year's game, the option of the game is to have it in or is to have the Boombox Classic again be at Legion Field, and after that, we have I guess it's like in 2025 and 2026, 2 straight years of Alabama State versus Southern. In my eyes, which I wrote about, I think in like January or February. In my eyes, I just don't see this getting off the ground. Not particularly this year for the SWAT Classic, but like in the next 2 years, I really think it's going to be a tough sell to have Alabama State fans go to Legion Field twice in 1 year. Seems kind of manufactured, honestly, to have them play Southern. I know Southern's a great big brand and everything, but I want to know your thoughts on the SWAT Classic. Is it doomed for the rest of the contract? Or is there a way that the conference and the schools can salvage the SWAC Classic?
Wow. The thing is, of course, you're going to have to find two programs, two fan bases that are going to be willing to go to Birmingham for that game. To your point, I just find it interesting that God, the name that I choose not to mention, but of course I have to mention because of course the viewers won't know exactly what I'm talking about at this moment. But Deion Sanders and during his tenure at Jackson State has been um the for the lack of a better term, the puppeteer behind the cancellation of both the SWAC Classic and what we originally knew as the Southern Heritage Classic. But it's not necessarily his fault. I understood why he did so because he felt as though that the two, well, that Jackson State most definitely was not receiving the revenue that they deserved in order to participate in those games, in which the way that probably the promoters wanted them to, i.e., to have the players come and play in the game, and of course to have the band come and play, and also take care of traveling, take care of lodging, and make sure that the school is properly compensated to play in that game. Unfortunately, though, those contracts were signed, and in most cases, rather recently too. And I felt as though that's something that they should have taken into consideration before signing those contracts. Um, uh, Especially when you look at the numbers that the SWAC challenge was looking to to pay out those schools. I'm trying to remember if it was your article that I saw that had this number in it, or another article where I believe that number was about 300,000 per school participating in the game, roughly.
Yeah, I think so. I pulled that number from the HBCU game day article. That sounds about right.
Yeah, so if that's the case, 300,000, that's mainly the reason why he said no to the Southern Heritage Classic. So if that's the case, yeah, I can see why he said no. I wouldn't do it either. And it's been what, about 3-4 months now since Mo Carter. Shout out to Mo Carter. You know, that's my boy right there. It's been about 3 or 4 months since Mo made the announcement that the game has been placed on hold, and they can't seem to find any dance partners as of right now to participate in that game. I don't know. Well, they won't find it for 2023. I don't know if they'll find it for 2024. I mean, you said it's supposed to be the Boombox Classic in 2024, correct? Um,
Yes. Yep.
Maybe they go ahead and play that thing out, and eventually it ends up dying off. Um, we'll have to wait and see if they can find a way to get better compensation for these institutions. But if not, yeah, I guess that's the end of it. But yeah, I'm going to need these promoters because, again, of course, having an HBCU classic sounds like a wonderful idea, and we've seen several HBCU classics over the past few years end up having to cancel their games and having to fall out because either, well, mainly for one thing, because of money, they can't either generate enough revenue to sustain the game, or generate enough revenue or generate enough money to compensate the schools properly to have the game in which to have the game the way in which they want to have it.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree with your points there, honestly. And just add on too, I think interesting kind of, I guess, case study that can add to this is the Tuskegee Morehouse Classic, that got moved from Columbus to Birmingham. And I was at the inaugural Birmingham game when I was living in Georgia at that time, and I saw this opportunity to visit Legion Field on a on a long weekend, probably at a cheaper price than the Magic City Classic for sure. And the crowd that I saw was insanely low. Officially 6,000, a little bit over 6,000 fans. And then looking at the box score for last year's game for that one, it was like less than 3,000. I mean, I can't imagine what a crowd like that looks like at Legion Field. So I guess the point I'm getting at is it's already an uphill battle because Legion Field is old. There aren't many sort of like stadium like connoisseurs or history fans that walk into Legion Field and view it as like, the important venue to college football as it is. They just see an old venue with a bunch of concrete benches and everything. Or so I mean that's already one uphill battle too. And also too, like someone has to lose a home game, someone has to lose that revenue, which I'm not sure how much teams like Southern and Jackson State and even Alabama State make on home games. For that $300,000 payout to actually be worthwhile, I imagine they make a lot when it's all said and done in terms of concessions and everything, and of course the game day ticket. So um, I just don't think the juice is worth the squeeze, sadly, for this game. Even though I mean, even though I guess the the SWAC is footing all the costs for it. So I too think it will fall to the wayside. I would like to see maybe, I guess, in the future they, I guess, maybe not the SWAC, but I guess the Birmingham Sports Commission or whatever it's called. I think I guess the organization that ran the Magic City Classic that just lost control of it. I think that is the same organization that has a hand in this. Maybe they redirect their attention to, I guess, the SEAC, even though the Tuskegee Morehouse experiment has gone awry. Maybe they kind of rotate schools in, so there isn't much Legion Field fatigue. But I gotta agree with you on all those points.
Yeah, I would be a little concerned though to have a Division II matchup in that game if they can figure out a matchup combination that'll at least draw maybe a third of the attendance for Legion Field. Then that would be something that I feel as though would be viable. for the organizers to do. But as of right now, yeah, I'm a little intrigued to see exactly how that would work. For anyone other than two SWAC opponents. But my guess is they attempted to do what them and the conference, the SWAC conference, again tried to jump on the success of having Deion Sanders in the SWAC by creating that game while he was there at Jackson State. And they were probably looking to also get broadcast rights, probably with ESPN, if not ESPN, HBCU Go for that game as well. But again, the numbers weren't looking right while Deion was there. Sanders is no longer there in Mississippi. What do you do at this point in order? And then, of course, schools have most definitely have their schedules kind of situated for 2024. I'm trying to figure out who would you convince and how much money it would take to convince two conference teams to come and play in Birmingham. And like you said, potentially lose a home game.
Yeah, and then I guess like with your point with like the crowd, excuse me, I guess the crowd demand, like trying to fill a third of Legion Field. What I like to see maybe the SWAC or whoever agrees with Birmingham kind of rework this game. Maybe put it in Rickwood, put a yearly game in Rickwood Field because it's baseball season right now.
Mm-hmm.
Jeez, excuse me, it's baseball season right now, and Hinchliffe. Sorry, I was at the C in the middle for that stadium, but Hinchliffe has gotten national press. I've never seen this much national press for an unaffiliated baseball team as I have seen for the New Jersey Jackals for opening Hinchliffe, a former Negro League stadium, and playing their home games there, just revitalizing that. I mean, I think the best thing the SWAC can do for itself from a publicity perspective, if they want the city of Birmingham to foot the bill, is put that money into revitalizing Rickwood Field and have a yearly game at Rickwood Field. Because I mean, there's been plenty of football games in the past. And it doesn't matter if you have to do one side football, like at Wrigley Field that one year, or like that Jacksonville State game, Jacksonville State North Alabama game. It doesn't matter. I think just the experience of playing at Rickwood, where Hank Aaron played, where so many other legends of honestly of baseball played, having a game there, I think that that trumps. I mean, any attendance you can have at Legion Field. So that's just my opinion on the whole situation. That's how I think the SWAC can sort of rectify it.
And I get it, especially with you being such a stadium connoisseur. You most definitely would love to see that game. The hope is that there are enough fans out there that would love that whole story of coming back to see a game played in that venue. The question, though, is with the current state of sports stadiums and the amenities that people are so used to, whether or not those stadiums or those venues would be at least comparable enough to have fans come and feel comfortable enough to come back on a regular basis. That is most definitely something that I am currently witnessing here in DC with it's been in hospice for some time now, but the pending death of RFK Stadium, the stadium that I grew up I'm clamoring over and finally get an opportunity to view games in my late childhood, and then of course up until they held the Nations Classic. As a matter of fact, I believe the Nations Classic, Nations Football Classic between Howard and Hampton was the last game played in that stadium. But with the stadium being in such disarray, and it was difficult to get fans to want to come back into that stadium, even though that stadium has such historic value to it. Yeah, everyone's looking for comfort now, and if you can't make the game day experience as comfortable as possible for fans, it's going to be a hard draw to have people come out to it.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's interesting you point that out. I mean, in terms of amenities, because I mean, even with the stadium like Mikey Stadium, which I mean, been too many times. I mean, even I found myself complaining about the concourse size. You know how narrow the concourses were. So there's always something that shows the age of these stadiums for sure. Um, but yeah, it'll be interesting too. Like, I do think we have become more spoiled as fans. And that just is what it is. Honestly, I mean, there isn't much else to say about that.
Yeah, but if you can get two strong bands to come in there, you most definitely will probably get a bigger draw. But outside of that, number two has to be the state of the stadium and how comfortable fans are when they go to view a game.
Absolutely. Moving on to another classic that met its quiet, I guess that officially met its quiet fate this year. The Texas class or the Arlington Classic, excuse me, between Texas Southern and Southern. It's been it first started off with the Cotton Bowl as like I think like the State Fair showdown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, didn't really have success there. I think for obvious reasons, where it's like if you want to see black college football in the area in the Cotton Bowl, you have Prairie View Grambling, you have the State Fair Classic. So it's kind of like saturated market there. So they moved it I guess into the Arlington suburbs and whatnot to Globe Life Park. Kind of mixed results there until quietly it wasn't on Texas Southern and Southern's schedule. Do you think this is the end? Do you think there are any more options for this classic? Or I guess like in retrospect, what were your thoughts on the lifespan of the Texas Southern Classic?
Sorry about that, Omar. It seemed as though with the what was that the first iteration of what was it the State Fair Classic? Those first 2 years. Hold on for a minute, Omar. Sorry about that, Omar.
No issues, no.
Yeah, I do apologize about that. With the first iteration of the State Fair Classic, um, those two games they actually had attendance. The first year, if I remember correctly, started at about maybe 15,000 and it dipped down to about 7,000. Then, of course, when they moved, and that was in 2018 and 2019, respectively. When the game moved to Arlington, the attendance actually ended up jumping up to about, I'm sorry, 15,000, 15 to 16,000 the last two seasons in Arlington. Um, I don't know because to your point, yes, the organizers most definitely want to have another game in the Dallas Fort Worth area because of the success of the State Fair Classic between Grambling and Prairie View A&M because of course that game draws about 50,000 every year. The thing is, I don't know, being that I don't know a lot about SWAC culture in the Dallas Fort Worth area. All I can surmise from the research that I did is that of course, with Grambling Prairie View being in the beginning of the State Fair class, was the beginning of the State Fair, and that second game being at the end of the State Fair, maybe there isn't as much excitement for that game as it is in the beginning because it's the beginning of the fair. Everybody wants to be there. You have all of the other events that go along with the State Fair Classic, the car show and all of the other events. I don't know if the same can be said about this Texas Southern matchup. If you don't have that draw, if people aren't necessarily clamoring, well, especially when it was in the Cotton Bowl, clamoring to come and see that game played um, in the Cotton Bowl at the end of the fair. When now it's in Arlington, even though the attendance has gone up. Um, Again, it goes back to economics. If it doesn't fiscally make sense, it's going to end up dying off. Um, but I believe that original contract was a 2 year contract, though, wasn't it, Omar?
I wasn't sure about the contract itself. I know. I think it was Mo Carter that responded to my question about it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, But yeah, it looks like it was a simple expiration of the contract. So yeah.
And with that contract expiring, they were only capable of getting a third of that stadium filled with that matchup. Maybe they just thought it's not working. And oddly enough, both classics, the one in the Cotton Bowl, and then this one it was Choctaw Stadium.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, with those two games, um, they just couldn't get a resemblance of what they saw with the State Fair Classic. So they just said, okay, we'll go ahead and play these two things out and move on.
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree too. I think it's interesting too in terms of the venues because it seems like with the two venues that they had the choice of, there's like I guess like kind of I guess prevailing issues with them, like the Cotton Bowl being too big. I swear I've never seen tarps at the Cotton Bowl ever, so seems like, they every event or I shouldn't say every event, but the two games that they run each year, they expect, full capacity for, which like this year the State Fair Classic had a great turnout. So I mean, of course I don't blame them for expecting it, not I guess not adjusting their, I guess, manpower in terms of security, concessions, and whatnot to suit that game. So I do expect that game was kind of expensive to run in the Cotton Bowl. And then you look
Mm-hmm.
at Choctaw Stadium, the former Globe Life park or field, whatever they called it, because of course they made the genius decision to call the second park the exact same thing, but just replace whether it was a field or a park. But that's a different problem. That's a different thing. I'm just glad it's called Choctaw now. But the former Rangers ballpark, of course, with it
Mm-hmm.
being a former baseball stadium, you have obstructed sight lines. Maybe not obstructed, but not the best sight lines too. So, I mean, I tend to think that the game experiences probably weren't the best either way. I mean, because there is a such thing as playing in a venue that's too big in terms of the atmosphere. I guess citing the 2021 Tuskegee Morehouse Classic that I went to, love Legion Field, but the venue is a bit too big compared to I guess it's called McClung Stadium, right? I'm already forgetting the name of the Columbus Stadium. It's like McClung Stadium or
Well, I couldn't tell you. You know better than I do.
I forgot already. When it was I just forgot the name when there really wasn't a possibility for me to go to that stadium, from not being close to it. But yeah, so I mean, I think that kind of pointed to it as well. I think it's interesting too. I mean, I do think I kind of wish that Texas Southern stuck with it. Uh, just given that they don't really have, I guess. I mean, they have the Labor Day Classic,
Mm-hmm.
huge rivalry as well. Not a neutral site classic. I just love neutral site games a lot, and it's also too Texas Southern gets overlooked. They're one of two MEAC and SWAC schools to have never appeared in the MEAC SWAC Challenge. So I kind of wish it worked out for them, but I can understand totally why it didn't. So um overall, yeah, I mean I guess I wouldn't say it was doomed from the start, but it was always going to be something tough to work out just based on the venues and I mean, I guess fan interest and distance, I guess.
Yeah, a 3.5, 4 hour drive from Houston to Dallas. I don't know what that drive is from Baton Rouge to Houston. But having to do that in late October, it, it just seems a little potentially taxing, especially in the middle of the football season. I know a lot of people don't mind necessarily doing that around a holiday or the beginning of the season, but once you start getting in the midst of a season, it makes it a little bit more difficult for those fans to want to travel out to go see a game.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. So, maybe there'll be a one-off game in the future, which I mean, I'm not ruling that out for sure. So we'll just see what the future holds for, I guess, that classic, the Arlington Classic. But for now, on hold, just another, I guess, failed classic, of the past now at this point.
Yeah,
Uh,
but that's the other interesting thing too, because while promoting this game and while advertising this game, both institutions talked about how large the alumni base is there in the Dallas Fort Worth area, but it just never showed up in the attendance of that game.
Yeah, and I wonder if part of that is I guess on Southern if for Southern's case, I wonder if Southern considers Texas Southern I guess that rivalry seems a bit manufactured. But I wonder if they consider Texas Southern like sort of like a little brother, because I know Texas Southern's fortunes haven't really been great this decade. In the or not this decade and in the 2010s in the SWAC. So I mean, I also kind of wonder if that kind of played into it.
Probably, but Texas Southern most definitely surprised them in the beginning of the season this year,
Oh yeah, no, absolutely,
shutting them out.
absolutely.
And I know most definitely Southern is looking for restitution, even though Southern did back their way into the conference title game with a TSU loss at the end of the season. But yeah, it'll be very intriguing to see exactly how that game plays out. But unfortunately, it won't be in Arlington.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I mean, yeah, just I mean, I know Texas Southern took the dub, so I don't want to get on the bad side of their fans. I know they took the dub this year. Just from my layman's perspective, that seems to be what I guess the rivalry dynamic. But I guess before I take any more heat, going on to our next topic, we have the MEAC. They moved 2 games to Thursday, and while it's not an official TV announcement, I mean, why else would they move 2 games to Thursday? The 2 games, of course, being Morgan State versus North Carolina Central, and then you have South Carolina State versus North Carolina Central. So, of course, you get the defending Black College Football champions twice on a weeknight. Very optimal. But I think I want to know your initial thoughts on these matchups and I guess the conference and ESPN's choices before I get into my thoughts on this.
My initial thought was, huh, a little rough because those are going to be 2 games, especially in mid October. I mean, it's a 16 league. Every game is going to mean something. Um, there was a 2 game difference between first and last place last year. Um, and you have, in my opinion, 2 of the top 3 teams in this upcoming year playing on Thursday nights this year with Morgan State, in my opinion, being the team on the rise in the conference, especially after their showing last year with new head coach Damon Wilson. And then, of course, like you said, you have last year's champion, and then the following week you have the last 2 Celebration Bowl champions playing in Durham, in South Carolina State and in North Carolina Central. My question is, I understand that ESPN doesn't necessarily care about the attendance of those games, but I know the fan bases do. I also know that the teams do in terms of attendance. And when you're talking about, in the case of um, Morgan State hosting North Carolina Central, hosting last year's champion, that might have been a huge draw for them. But now it makes it tough for them on a Thursday night when they're which is in the middle of the week, along, excuse me, with the fact that, of course, it's going head to head with the NFL on Thursday nights. Even though that game is on Prime, it's a little bit different, but I digress. And then, of course, the following week, with Central hosting South Carolina State, that might be the regional rivalry now that North Carolina A&T is no longer in the MEAC, along with the fact that that was the game. Well, no, South Carolina State did win that game last year, if memory serves me correctly. In Orangeburg, yes, they won that game by 2. Um, you know, if South Carolina State they might surprise people. I don't put anything past Buddy Pugh. They could be in the race and having to travel to Durham for that game. To play on a Thursday. Again, I don't know what the Eagles are going to look like in terms of attendance in the stadium, and I think that that's something that the school most definitely feels as though it's going to be a loss for them in terms of revenue generated, in terms of ticket sales and concessions or whatever. So I believe that will be a huge hit for them and something that they're not necessarily happy about. But ESPN is just most definitely looking for content to have on Thursdays, and if you can't make it, you probably watch it. But I don't know if that's going to be enough for the schools.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's good because I didn't realize that there was only one game on a Thursday night last year to sort of put the MEAC in the spotlight. I was shocked by that. Of course, it was the game that Davis Richard kind of introduced himself to the country, 6 touchdowns, and North Carolina Central at 42, 42 first half points in a 59-20 win. But for me, I guess I mean, you mentioned Morgan State on the rise, but I kind of wish that they kind of put Howard in one of these two games because Howard, of course, won a share of the conference, of course, last year. Howard, of course, being on the rise, and I mean they have a lot of experience in offense returning as well. Um, so it just seems like a very interesting choice for Morgan State. But I mean, Morgan State too. I mean, they got a lot of returning talent, but the one person they don't return, of course, Alfonso Graham. So it's kind of interesting to see how they regroup on offense. But I mean, they got a lot of pieces returning on defense. But again, I mean, I'll watch any team. Of course, I'm an Army fan. It doesn't matter what offense you run. Maybe, but for the casual fan flipping channels on a Thursday night, seeing, I guess the main Thursday night game being a blowout, I don't know if Morgan State is the most casual fan friendly team with their pass offense only averaging about 120 yards per game last year. And I think their starting quarterback has moved on. The second transfer after Neil Boudreau, good
Hmm.
friend of the podcast, Neil Boudreau. I'm pretty sure he's graduated too, so there's even more questions at quarterback. So I mean, I just don't know if that's the most TV worthy team. I think, and then with the South Carolina State North Carolina Central game, I think South Carolina State being a weeknight game is definitely a given. Not just because of I mean Buddy Pugh's I guess track record as coach, but also the NFL talent that's in the league, namely Shaq Leonard. I mean that's definitely a way in cut-ins and whatnot to just kind of bring love to the MEAC. I mean a very easy way to say like, hey, like the MEAC is an NFL factory. Shaq Leonard and even Jacoby Durant, who had a great rookie year, but definitely overshadowed by the Rams, kind of imploding throughout the year. But I mean, that definitely, I think it's definitely a given. But I kind of do wish Howard was included in the two games, and especially too because Green State. Now I'm not sure if Howard NC Central is a home game per se for as a home game for Howard. But I mean, Green Stadium has lights now. They had their first home game a couple years ago, or first home night game a couple years ago, so they can make it happen. But yeah, that's just my take on it too. And of course, too, from a markets perspective as well. From market perspective as well for the conference, I guess you kind of don't love seeing South Carolina State having one of the weeknight games. Maybe you go for a Howard Norfolk State or even a Howard Morgan State, and then you can have your North Carolina Central versus a South Carolina State game on the other end. So either way, I'm gonna have those games on the TV, but there's always something to pick apart, and that's just what I'm choosing to do. But I don't have a problem with it, but I would have gone a different way.
No, I'm right there with you on that. Oddly enough, just check that that Central Howard game is going to be in DC. It's going to be in late November, well, mid-November. The next to the last game of the season. God, that might be the de facto championship game based upon what we saw from last year. But again, like I said, I there isn't a team I don't like in this conference because I feel as though that everybody has the ability to beat everybody. Um, but to your point, to have the conference champion from last season on those back-to-back weeks, playing those games, I feel as though that was the reason why it was done, along with the fact that, like you said, while broadcasting the game, you can most definitely talk about the history of South Carolina State football. You can most definitely talk about Shaq Leonard. You can talk about the Kobe Durant, and of course, don't forget about God. He's now in San Francisco. Used to play with Philadelphia. The D tackle.
Hargrave.
Hargrave, yes,
Yeah,
Javon Hargrave.
yeah.
Um, yeah. So they most definitely with Buddy Pugh being an NFL factory in terms of generating defensive talent from that program is something they will most definitely discuss. But you're right. The fact of missing out on having Howard that has most definitely turned that program around. Um, Winning a share of the conference championship last year. Um, and in my opinion, one of the three teams, along with Morgan State and North Carolina Central, that are favorites in my eyes to win the conference this upcoming season. I think that was a missed opportunity, especially with that game being the week before the week before the final week of the regular season.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't spun up on the conference calendar, but definitely like having a mid-November weeknight game definitely helps as like with the looks of the conference. I know a lot of teams in that final week use a non-conference game, which I think it's interesting how that works out with other FCS leagues. I guess whether I think a couple years ago, I'm looking at the 2021 Morgan State schedule to find out when their weeknight game against Delaware State was. But in looking at that, I noticed that they played Georgetown in their final weekend. So I mean, even doing something like before the final weekend of the season, excuse me, for the final Saturday of the season, I think it definitely could add some spice to that weekend as well. With I mean, a lot of schools playing non-conference games, but also too, I know you mentioned it being in a November game, and my first thought with all the stuff happening in the Big Ten is like, I wonder what the league commissioners think about November weeknight games. But the Morgan State Delaware State game from a couple years ago that was on a November weeknight, in Baltimore, and I can't imagine it was too pleasant outside. So. I mean, I guess it's not an excuse either. So I guess whether I mean in these days, I don't know if the commissioners had as much of a say. I mean, heck, even when it comes to the Big Ten, the top echelon of college sports, the commissioners didn't have a complete say. So I just think it's interesting whether it was an information gap on ESPN, in dictating what games they wanted, how they left out Howard, or something else. But yeah, I think it's a missed opportunity. Hopefully they can flex something, but with it being late in the game, close to the season, I think it's highly unlikely.
Might be a possibility. And I know I probably sounded as if I was contradicting myself, saying that it's not a great thing to have these games on Thursday nights, only to follow up and say that if they were to do one, it probably should have been Central and Howard in mid November. But uh, yeah, I'm wondering if that's something the conference is necessarily still interested in doing um more than once a year anyway nowadays, because of how hard it is to have fans come out on a Thursday night, especially to have fans travel on a Thursday night. um I have not been to Morgan or to Durham on a Thursday night to see exactly what traffic is like getting to those stadiums on a Thursday. How difficult it would be to have those that will probably be commuting from work to go to a game that hour, whether or not they would even want to be interested in going out on the Thursday night to watch those matchups or not. Um, but yeah, unless it's worthwhile to the programs and to the conference to have these games on Thursday, I don't know outside of exposure what these games are worth having them played on Thursday nights anymore.
Yeah, and I mean, I think I definitely agree as well. As I mean, we're kind of seeing the effect of, I mean, cord cutting now. I mean, starting with RSNs, who knows what'll happen. Even though I think channels like ESPNU are safe, um, but with ESPN's growing streaming footprint on ESPN Plus, I mean, it's interesting to see like, how much these games really mean, because I mean I mean, just at the surface, an ESPN Plus subscription where you get tons access to tons of conferences. Now they're not marquee games, but it's still college football nonetheless. And then ESPNU where you gotta have, whether YouTube TV, Hulu Live TV subscription. I mean, on the surface, you get access to more sports content on ESPN Plus compared to ESPNU. So I mean, who knows like what'll happen to a network like ESPNU? Who knows how much exposure on ESPNU will mean compared to ESPN Plus in the near future. But also something you said too. I mean, I also wonder too on the flip side, just to contradict myself now. I wonder how much the effect of the ES or the NFL being on Amazon Prime will have on these games. I mean, whether I guess the both college games, the ESPN game, or even if Fox Sports One has a game, or of course the MEAC game, whether that will carry more weight and that will get more attention because fans are just fed up with having not only to get an Amazon Prime subscription for Thursday night football, but also to catch a playoff game, you have to get a Peacock subscription, for a month in January. I wonder how fed up fans will be, and I guess how important these games are, like in terms of accessibility. How crucial these games will be for fans.
Now, we actually discussed this not too long ago when they made the announcement about the playoff game move to Peacock. The benefit of that is that it'll be on the free version of Peacock, so they don't necessarily have to pay for a subscription in order to get it. That's more that has to be a tactic to draw more people into getting Peacock that normally don't already have it. And I know with the cable subscription that I have, it automatically comes with it. But yeah, to your point, it'll be intriguing because I'm still trying to get my mindset out of that antiquated thought process of and it's just me being old. People have to forgive me, please. I'm asking for forgiveness of knowing that these games that were being played traditionally on ESPNU, having to go up against the NFL on Thursday nights on ESPN, how much I despised having to see that. But and a lot of those were actually great matchups. Except for the one I have in mind, watching my Aggies get blown out by Bethune-Cookman, still bothers me to this day. But with that said, I know now with that game going to Amazon Prime, this game being on ESPNU, you're right. How many people who are just going to be looking for football that aren't necessarily MEAC fans that will want to go over to that matchup and watch it? And I just find it interesting. I don't know if it's been announced yet whether or not the SWAC would end up flexing any of their games over to Thursday night this upcoming season either. And if they don't choose to do so, my only guess is that they feel as though that having those games moved over to Thursday hurts their bottom line in terms of attendance for those matchups.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I think in terms of both conferences, I do think the MEAC is in more of a state of desperation from a revenue perspective. Just of course, like you said, 6 football playing schools, 8 total members too. And I mean the 2 members that don't play football are kind of, I mean, they're saturated into a market that already has, 1 member that plays football. So you have 3 members in one market. So I mean, of course, football is king here in America. So I mean, in that sense, it's like it's like the main bargaining chip, I guess the main viewing draw of MEAC athletics isn't Coppin State or UMBC. I'm sorry, not UMBC. Sorry, who
UMass.
UMES, UMES. Excuse me, UMES. But one of the football playing schools, of course, because that's who we see on ABC. Once, or if the cat's out of the bag on Wednesday, twice a year. So I mean, with that, it's like I mean, you can kind of see the desperation where it's like the SWAC doesn't need Thursday as much as the MEAC does, even if it's just 1 or 2 Thursdays.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to see because I wonder I wonder if by now you would have seen the SWAC move because I don't really keep track of like the timetable of a lot of these announcements, but I mean, I guess by now with it almost being June, you would have already seen the movements, right, to Thursday.
You
So.
would have by now. That was my thought process, is that you would have at least seen it by now. If not by now, within the next coming weeks. But yeah. Like I said, I haven't seen it yet. I doubt that it happens. Um, because I believe that the SWAC has become a lot more conscious of what that game does to them as it pertains to the live experience versus whether or not you're getting exposure, you're generating content for ESPN, and whether or not that money is going to be enough for them to want to have that game during a weeknight.
And you mentioned the SWAC with the game day experiences, like off the top of my head, like the two games that I can remember, I guess, two Thursday night games for last year. The SWAC is like the one home game that Mississippi Valley State had where they upset Alabama A&M, and then it seems to be like Bethune-Cookman always has one or two Thursday night games a year. And off the top of my head, I mean those two stadiums, I mean those two kind of atmosphere, game day atmospheres always seem like I guess they would be on the bottom of the list in terms of I guess fan attendance and everything with Mississippi Valley State just being where it's at geographically and with their stadium just now getting important updates and of course a Bethune-Cookman Stadium being off campus being I think it's a municipally owned stadium as well. So I think those two schools are what I think of when I think of SWAC Thursday games, just because of what their game day experience offers. In relation, now I'm not saying it's bad, but in relation to a Southern, a Jackson State, a Grambling, or any of the Alabama schools, that's just what I think of. I think the schools that kind of lack in that game day experience kind of take those games and like don't really see much of a loss in experience.
Yeah, and to your point in terms of the scheduling, the televised scheduling, I just wanted to check to make sure. I know the individual institutions have released their schedules, but the SWAC as a conference hasn't done so on their website as of yet. So my guess, like you said, within the next few weeks, we'll get an understanding, of probably as we get a little bit closer to the media day, which is going to be on the 25th of July for the SWAC. I think that's when we'll get more of an understanding of whether or not those games will be moved over to if they'll end up having any games moved over to Thursday night or not.
All right, yeah, I was even aware that SWAC did not release their schedule yet. So yeah, I mean, so something definitely could be coming, but we'll
Yeah.
definitely see. Either way, I mean, I'll be watching these games, here, so no complaints from me, just suggestions. But that concludes everything I had to talk about. Dwayne, do you have anything final to add or promote?
Nothing else as of right now to promote. Um, football season is coming up, so within the next um month or so, uh I know with Hero Sports we normally start doing our previews for the upcoming season. But you can follow me at the Yard-HBCU Sports on all social media platforms, or you can follow Hero Sports. That's Hero Sports FCS on Twitter. They most definitely, along with myself, would start to advertise whenever we start to preview the upcoming football season per conference. So once those start to come out, you can follow us and see exactly when they're ready for viewing.
I mean, and I just have to say that I'm just so grateful for your work, Dwayne, in terms of the previews because I hardly write previews. I find previews to kind of be a chore, previews and game recaps to be a chore. So I'm just glad that you do it and I can just, you know, fill in the information that I don't have and just be informed, because previews I like writing about conference realignment and like future matchups. For me, previews are a chore, because I mean X's and O's. There's a ton of people that talk X's and O's and statistics, so uh, I'm not one of them. So I'm just glad that people like you do the dirty work and look at the box scores.
Hey, numbers is something that I thoroughly enjoy. I blame my mom for that, being that, of course, she's a mathematician, and a little bit of that has rubbed off on me. And looking at numbers and looking at stats is primarily is something that I enjoy doing, and enjoy doing it from my own personal perspective. But yeah, I'm glad that I could be of assistance to you there, Omar.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do appreciate it. But yeah, I will definitely be consuming your work, and I hope that once I leave those links in my description, that all of you listening or watching will do the same as welcome football season because we're close. By the end of this week, we will be 2 months away, less than 3 months away. So just an exciting time. But again, hopefully this you found this to I guess make your appetite more or bigger for college for the season to come up. Duane, thank you again for coming on. Always a joy to have you. And looking forward already to the next time you're on the podcast. And everyone, thanks for listening. Happy Memorial Day and peace, love, and soul.